Before we get into today's game, I want to talk about the sponsors for my channel. Card Conduit is the best way to sell your unused Magic cards. Whether you've got a box of unsorted bulk, or a complete and alphabetized set, there's a great option for everyone. With a payout averaging 19% better than using any one buy list, and that's after fees are applied, you can rest assured you'll get the best bang for your buck. If you're a skeptic like me, their easy customer service and detailed reports make the whole interaction transparent and safe. And if you use the affiliate link in the description below, or the promo code MTGMUDSTA, you'll save 10% off their fees. And 401 Games, Canada's one-stop shop for trading cards, board games, and hobby supplies. Not to mention an easy to use and great online buy list. And if you use the promo code MTGMUDSTA, your first purchase of MTG sealed and singles will be 5% off. And Dragon Shield, the strongest sleeves for your strongest deck. So be sure to use the code MUDSTA or the affiliate link down below to save 5% on your next order. Max draws and casts Find, bringing back...
Oh, hey gang, welcome back. I bet you're wondering why you're seeing my face as opposed to other players making questionable threat assessment in a game of Commander. Well, that's because we have a couple things to talk about before getting into today's game. First off, I've hit an incredible milestone of 95,000 subscribers, which is just absolutely surreal, and I wouldn't be here without you, so yeah, thank you. It's awesome. At this point, we're inching ever closer to the milestone 100,000, which is something I never really thought about, but now that we're getting closer to it, it's kind of exciting. Now, as I'm sure you've seen from the thumbnail of today's game, we're basically going to be playing Modern Horizons 3 Precons for the next week. I'm excited, they're really well done and they're really fun decks. And I may have made a little mistake. In trying to acquire them to make sure I had them in time, I ordered them from 2 different shops, just to make sure that I was going to be able to get them for Friday. Well, in a happy circumstance, both shops got them, so I was happy to buy them. That means I have an extra set of Commander Precon decks. So by Thursday, you're going to be finding out how you can enter to win one. I'm going to be giving away one to different people and just kind of have fun with it. So yeah, let's get into today's game.
Today's patron shoutout goes to Delmer Lacroix. Thanks Delmer for supporting me through Patreon. In today's game, John, Arja, Max, and Mathieu have joined me to play the Modern Horizon 3 Precon decks. When they sat down, they had no idea what they were playing since they were all face down, so this was as much of a surprise for them as it is for you. In today's game, John is playing Satya, keeping Akroma's Will, Aurora Shifter, Gonti's Aether Heart, Plains, Hourglass of the Lost, Temple of Triumph, and a Furycom Snarl. Arja is playing Omo, keeping Lumbering Falls, Urza's Power Plant, Arcane Signet, Planar Nexus, Hydroid Crassus, Terastodon, and Phalerophrous Vinewall. Max is playing Disa, keeping Liliana Death's Majesty, Sawhorn Nemesis, Siphon Mind, Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, Rampant Growth, and Grapple with the Past. Last but not least, Mathieu has brought his tentacles with Ulalek, keeping Secluded Courtyard, Bismuth Mindrender, Sifter of Skulls, Endbringer, Island, Spawning Bed, and Swamp. John wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a Temple of Triumph, scrying 1. Arja plays a tap Lumbering Falls. Max draws and plays a Command Tower. Mathieu draws, playing a Corrupted Crossroads and passing back to John. John plays out a Furycom Snarl, revealing a Plains from hand. He then plays out Unstable Amulet and passes to Arja. Arja's got an Urza's Power Plant, and he then taps 2 for an Arcane Signet. He passes after that. Max plays an Exotic Orchard for turn, and casts Rampant Growth, going to find a Swamp, and passing. Matt draws, and plays a Secluded Courtyard, naming Eldrazi, obviously, and passes after that. John has a Plains for turn, and casts one of many new cards this game, with Hourglass of the Lost. Arja plays a Planar Nexus, one of the strongest cards I think being introduced in this set, and he then casts Omo. As they enter, he puts an Everything counter onto his Lumbering Falls, and he passes after that. Max draws and plays a Forest. He casts Siphon Mind, and each opponent discards a card, while Max draws 3. After that, Max passes. Mathieu's turn is quite easy as he plays a Swamp, and passes. John draws and casts an Amped Raptor. He reveals a Razorfield Ripper off the Pseudo Cascade, and then casts it with energy. This has each opponent taking 1 from the unstable amulet, and John then moves the Razorfield Ripper to the Raptor, and he passes after that. Arja draws and plays a Volatile Fault. He casts his Hydroid Crassus, putting 4 into the X, and draws 2 and gains 2 life. Moving to combat, he swings Omo at Max, putting an everything counter onto the Crassus and the Fault, and dealing 1 to Max. After that, Arja passes. Max just draws, plays a Tainted Peak, and then casts Disa, hoping to make some Tarmogoyfs. Mathieu draws and plays an island. He casts a Waterscape Battle Mage with the green kicker paid, and exiles the Razorfield Ripper and passes back to John. John draws and plays a Soul Ring. He follows up with Lightning Runner, and then goes to combat. He swings the Lightning Runner and Raptor at Mathieu, and Mathieu chumps the Runner and still takes 2. This has John getting 2 energy, which he then uses to activate the Unstable Amulet, revealing a Jolted Awake that he sadly doesn't have the mana for. With nothing else, John passes. Arja's got a Talon Gates of Madara, phasing out Disa as it comes in. He then has enough mana for Mana Reflection, and he goes to combat. He swings the Crassus at Matt, and Omo goes at John. Neither block, with Mathieu taking 4 and John taking 1 commander damage. With nothing else, Arja passes. Max plays a Canyon Slew.
Tapped Canyon Slough.
Slew, yeah.
And he goes to combat, swinging Disa at Arja. Arja takes the hit, with Max making a Tarmogoyf token, and checks, and there are 3 card types in the graveyard. He then flashes back Faithless Looting, drawing 2 and discarding 2, and passes after that. Mathieu draws and plays a Spawning Bed as his land for turn. He then has enough mana for Ulalek, and he passes to John after that. John draws and goes straight to combat. He swings both of his creatures at Arja, with John getting 2 energy and Arja taking 6. In his post-combat main phase, John then casts an Aether Geode Minor. Arja draws and has so much mana, so he decides to cast a Terastodon. As it comes in, he destroys Matt's 3 non-basics and gives Matt 3 elephant tokens. Arja then follows up with an aggressive Biomancy, and he targets the Terastodon, making 2 more Terastodons. As they come in, he blows up most of John's lands and Max's lands, plus fights Ulalek and Disa with them. With the fight on the stack, Max casts a Grapple with the Past, and unfortunately doesn't hit anything for a Tarmogoyf. With the fights then resolving, Arja then goes to combat. He swings the Crassus at John for 4, and passes after it connects. Max draws and plays the command tower that he returned to hand with the Grapple with the Past. He then casts Riveteer's Charm on Arja, and makes him sack one of his big creatures, which is the original Terastodon. After that, Max passes. Mathieu draws, but with little mana to use, has nothing to do but pass. John activates his Unstable Amulet after an unsatisfying draw, exiling Localized Destruction. Unfortunately with no lands though, he can't cast it, and has to pass. Arja's main phase has him casting Uro after he draws for turn. He draws again and gains 3, but has no land to put into play. He then follows up with Tatyova, and then Dryad of Ilsean Grove, and he goes to combat. Arja just swings the Crassus at Matt for 4, and passes to Max after that. Max's turn has him drawing and then playing a Riveteer's Overlook, sacrificing it and going to find a mountain and gaining 1 life. He then casts a Polygoyf and passes to Mathieu. Matt draws and plays an Everflowing Chalice, multi-kicked once, and then passes once it resolves. John draws and finds a mountain to play. He's then got enough mana to cast a Chroma's Will, giving his creatures Flying, Double Strike, and Vigilance. He then goes to combat and swings out at Arja, knocking him down to 4, but is unable to finish the job and just has to pass after that. Arja draws for turn and decides to draw some more with a Harmonize. He then plays a hidden Cataract, gaining 1 and drawing a card from Tatyova. Arja then continues playing Blast Zone and gains another life and draws another card. He then casts Expedition Map and passes. Max draws and casts Chandra's Ignition, targeting his Tarmogoyf token. But Arja's ready, responding with Pongify to take it out and fizzle the wipe. With nothing else, Max passes. Matt draws and plays a Brushland. He's then able to cast one of my favorite cards, Hedron Archive, and passes to John. John draws and decides to choose Violence, going to combat and swinging out at Arja again. Arja lines up his blocks, and before moving to damage, John blinks the Aether Geode Miner, but lets the rest of his creatures die. With nothing else, John then passes through his faces and passes to Arja. Arja draws her turn and cracks the Expedition Map in his main phase, going to find a Dark Depths. He then plays it, and follows up with Vesuva and has it come in as a copy of the Talon Gates, phasing out Polygoyf. Arja then continues by escaping Uro, and he puts a Forest into play and draws a card and gains 3 life, plus draws another card and gains another life from Tatyova. He then plays an Elvish Rejuvenator, which finds a Simic Growth Chamber. And with the chamber coming in, he bounces Vesuva and gains a life and draws a card from Tatyova. Max's turn doesn't have nearly as many lands, with him just playing a Temple of Malice tapped and scrying 1. He then plays a Bituminous Blast and targets Tatyova. He cascades first, revealing until he hits an Anger. Tatyova then gets taken out, and he passes to Matt after that. Matt draws and plays a Tendo Ice Bridge. He then casts Twins of Discord and passes to John. John draws but is stuck on lands and just has to pass. During his end step, Arja removes 3 counters from Dark Depths and moves to his turn. Arja draws and plays a Cloud Post. He then goes to combat, swinging Uro at Matt, and draws a card and puts Vesuva into play as a copy of Cloud Post. Matt then just takes 6. After combat, Arja plays Nissa, Steward of Elements for 2, and then upticks her and scries 2. He passes to Max after that. Max draws and casts Find, bringing back his Sawhorn Nemesis, and then casts it. As it comes in, he chooses Arja. Going to combat, Max swings everything but the Polygoyf at Arja, and the Polygoyf goes at John, and because it has Myriad, a copy goes at Arja and Matt as well. Arja responds by dumping his mana into Dark Depths, but can't remove all the counters to make Merit Lage sadly. He then lines up his blocks, chumping with the Elvish Reclaimer, blocking Anger with Omo, but still drops down to 4 again. Matt and John each take their damage from Polygoyf, and Max then moves to a second main phase. He casts a Stitcher's Supplier, milling 3, and passing to Matt. Matt draws and casts Soul Ring. He goes to combat and swings 3 elephants at Arja, naming evens with Twins of Discord's trigger. Without enough blockers, Arja dies, and Matt then moves to a second main phase. He casts an Ancient Stirrings, and reveals an Oblivion Sower. He follows it up with Spawnbed Protector, and then goes to his end step. This gets the Spawnbed Protector trigger, and he returns Endbringer to his hand, and makes 2 Eldrazi Scion tokens. John plays a Talisman of Progress, and then cashes in the Hourglass of the Lost for 5, getting back the Lightning Runner, and Sphinx of the Revelation. John then casts an Aurora Shifter, and he goes to combat, and makes the Shifter a copy of the Lightning Runner. John swings out at Max, and Max blocks the Miner with the Stitcher Supplier, and the Aurora Shifter with the Sawhorn Nemesis. Max then takes 4, and with nothing else, John passes. With the Stitcher dying, Max mills another 3. Max's turn has him casting a Gluttonous Hellkite, putting 2 into the X. This has each player sacrificing 2 creatures for a total of 6, and the Hellkite enters with 12 +1/+1 counters. One of those creatures is Anger, so Max's creatures now all have haste. He swings the Polygoyf at John, and the Hellkite goes at Matt. Matt still drops to 1 despite blocking the Polygoyf with one of his massive Eldrazi, while John just takes a hit. With nothing else, Max passes. Matt draws and casts the Oblivion Sower. He targets John and exiles 2 lands off the top 4 and puts them into play. Matt then swings out at Max and drops him to 6. He then casts an Endbringer in his post-combat main phase, and he goes to his end step after that. He gets back the Wastegate Battle Mage with the Protector trigger, and makes 2 Scion tokens, and passes. John draws and finally gets a land with the Plains. He casts Localized Destructive Wipe to wipe the board, but unfortunately kills Matt as collateral because of the amulet. After that, John activates the amulet again, revealing a mountain into exile, and then passing. Max draws and casts a Barrowgoyf. He then casts Exterminator Magmark, and he goes to combat. He swings out at John, dealing 11 to him, and jumping up to 11 because Barrowgoyf has lifelink. He also decides to mill because of the Barrowgoyf, but reveals no creatures from his trigger, and just passes to John. John's got a mountain for turn from the amulet, and then activates it and hits a Talisman of Creativity. John then casts the Talisman, dealing 1 to Max, and then casts Stone Idol Generator. Once it's out, he activates it and makes a 6/12. With nothing else, John passes. Max's turn has been casting Zatora, and he goes to combat. He swings out, and with Trample from Braun in his graveyard, John doesn't have enough to block, and Max takes the game. Game review time. This game was 1 hour, 13 minutes, and 10 seconds, and a big thank you to everyone who came out and joined us during the live stream of playing this. I was worried we weren't going to get the decks in time since everything going on in my life was a bit hectic and I didn't get a chance to pre-order them very early, but thankfully everything worked out. That being said, I was really impressed with a lot of the reprints in these decks. There are some remarkably expensive cards, and the decks somewhat seem like they're pretty well put together. Unfortunately for John, I think not having lands for most of the game really set him back, although he did seem to be making a lot of energy, so if he'd been able to cast his commander, I think he was going to be making some tokens and keeping them around. Mathieu playing Ulalek suffered the same thing, which apparently when you get all of your lands blown up by Terastodons, it can make things a bit difficult. He did manage to recover though, and things were getting pretty spicy. That Spawn Protector making Scions and bringing stuff back to his hand seemed really good. And even without a massive board, those Twins of Discord were making things very problematic, since he was able to name whatever his opponents had more of, odds or even, and make blocking really difficult for them. It's a shame that Max didn't get to do more with Disa. At least he was able to connect once and get to make that Tarmogoyf token, but even without her, we still got to see some cool Lurgoyfs. And although not a relevant creature type, that Sawhorn Nemesis did some work this game. When I was sleeving these 4 decks up before the stream, I was the least impressed with Omo, which in hindsight is probably just showing how bad I am at Commander. There are some distinct advantages to having only 2 colors as opposed to 3 or 5, and let's face it, Simic only wants to do 2 things, draw cards and ramp lands, and Arja got to do both of those. He had so much mana that he was almost able to activate Dark Depths enough times by himself to make Merit Lage, which just seems wildly silly considering the deck uses the combo of Thespian Stage and Dark Depths usually as a way to cheat it out. But as I said, I think all the decks were pretty great, and Game 2, which comes out Thursday, features the secondary commanders, and I think everyone gets to do a little bit more than this game. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, but it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.